Okie dokie, and we meet once again. This is video number 6 of our Move Smart Contract Language tutorial. This video tutorial, we are going to take a look at tables in Move, but tables are not native to the Move Smart Contract language. Tables, it's a type that's part of the APTOS framework. So we are now going to start importing the APTOS framework into our module and taking advantage of other types and other functions that we have in the APTOS framework and we can incorporate into our Move Smart Contract. Tables is very similar to a map. If you remember the map video, the table, it's defined based on a key value and the data that is associated to that key. I'm going to write a struct because, as you remember on the storage videos that we just covered, the struct can be defined as a type. I can say struct and the struct name. Let's do the following. Let's do a very simple module that is going to store properties. Real estate properties like houses, apartment, okay? Because we want to sell real estate. We're going to do an application that is going to sell real estate and we are going to store the listings on the blockchain. I am going to define a struct that is going to have all the information regarding a property, the bathrooms, how many square meters is this property, the location of the property, etc. So I'm going to call this struct properties, call this property. You just do it in red. And now this property struct is going to have the following attributes. Has store, because obviously we want to store the information in the blockchain. It has copy and it has drop. Let's define the properties, okay? First one's going to be beds. This will be type U16. Let's now do baths, U16. Let's do square meter. I think it can still be U16. We're now going to add a string to store the physical address of the apartment, the city and the country. It's going to be type string. We're going to have price. Let's define this U64 because we need to have a bigger number, right? And let's close it. Now, we know that this struct can be defined as a type. We can reference to this particular property type. A table, it looks very similar to a map. So let me change this color. We have a key. It's usually a value. It can be numeric and the data that we need to store. The data needs to be defined as a type. So if we are storing a table that is just going to have strings, then our type will be string. If we're storing integers, we're storing unsigned integers. The data will be either U64 if it's just numbers that you're storing, it could be strings, or we can pass the struct as another type. So let's do property here. I'm gonna just copy this and bring it down here. I need to store 3 houses under the same seller. So I, as a seller, I have 3 houses that I want to sell. When I pass the data into the smart contract, I need to pass the key, right? The reference to where am I going to place this on the table. And I can say the following. I'm going to expand this. I'm going to have 1 property, 2 properties, and 3 properties inside this table. When we define this, we can say, well, key 0 is property 1. And we can continue doing this with the other ones. So we'll say 1, and we can say 2. As a matter of fact, I don't even have to define this to be in order. This is a key that we are going to use to find the data, to reference to the data. So when I pass the arguments, I will be passing the information that it's going to be referenced as type property. Type property has all these parameters. So I have to build this beforehand. So then I can pass those details and I can store all the properties. So let's go ahead and just build a smart contract and let's build a table and let's do the function to read and write and let's go from there. It's very straightforward. Okay, so let's go. And let's call this tables demo move module net to dev ADDR. Then we'll call this tables demo. We are officially in this video tutorial importing the APTOS framework. So we are going to start using the APTOS framework on our modules. Use, now instead of std, we are going to type APTOS _ framework, okay? From here, we are going to import table. And from table, we want to import self because we still need to use other functions located in this table module. And we are also going to be importing the type table, okay? So we're importing those 2. I got to import signer, okay, because we're going to be referencing to the signer, the table. So I'm going to say use std signer. Then we are going to say use std, and we are storing strings. So I have to invoke string, and I'm going to import string as a type, okay? Now let's build the property. Let's build that type property. So I'm going to say struct property has store, copy, and drop. And let's do beds. We are saying U16, beds, U16, defining square meter. And let's just also call this U16, physical address. This will be type string, right? And finally, let's do the price, okay? So I'm gonna say price. And this will be U64, it's a bigger integer, okay? Now that we have the property, now we can build a table. So we can pass this type property and build a table. So for that, I need to build a struct that is going to classify the properties. So it's going to let us count how many properties each seller is selling on the market. And also it's going to give us the opportunity to sort all the properties based on ID. So check this out, struct prop list. I'm just gonna call this prop list attribute. It's going to be key because obviously we want to reference the storage to every single signer. Info will be the first property. And now, ladies and gentlemen, this is where we define the table to be the type. We are going to say table instead of us just passing property here. We are defining the table, okay? So inside here, I have to define first the key, which is U64, and then what's the data that is associated to the key, which is going to be the property struct, okay? We define this to be a type, okay? So now we can use that to pass as a type. And then I am going to define a prop ID. This will be an ID that I can assign to every single property that has been listed on the market by the seller, okay? And this will be just U64. Beautiful. Once I submit listings, it's just going to append the information to every key, and the information will be a struct with all those values, okay? Beautiful. So now I'm going to do the first thing. I got to initialize the storage. We remember on the previous videos, you have to initialize that storage space. So what we're going to do, we're going to register every seller. So the first function that we're going to call is to register the seller. So I'm going to say register _ seller, okay? And the only argument that I have to pass is the account, which will be designer. And this will say size signer, and that's it. Now we have to initialize the storage, which means that I have to pass the arguments empty. Let's call this init property, yeah, just like the autocomplete. And we're going to say prop list, okay? This will be the struct, and we call now the arguments. Info, what will be inside the info, okay? We have to define a brand new table. How do we create a table? We are going to call table from the module. Then from there, we call the function new. That's how we create a new table, okay? We'll do comma, and now we pass a prop ID. If we have never ever stored any properties, and this is empty, this is not storing any property, this will be 0, okay? So this will be the first property ID. And now we're going to say move to, if we want to now pass it to the storage. We are going to say account, right? This will be the key, and then the value will be init property. And there you go, okay? So we have the first function defined. This initializes the storage with empty data. The next function is to add to the table. Let's add our first property. We're going to say function list property, okay? And we're going to pass 2 arguments. It's going to be the account, the signer, and we are also passing the property details, okay? So we are going to define the argument prop info _ info, and this will be what? It's going to be type property. We want to pass this value, okay? This will be the type. Now, and as a matter of fact, I can press enter and I can break and do continue down here. Say acquire, and now we are going to acquire what? Prop list, okay? Why am I doing this? You should know by now. You should know that I need to acquire every time that I have to borrow or I have to move from. If I need to do those operations, I have to acquire the prop list, the struct, okay? I have to acquire the struct that I'm going to be performing the operation to. With that said, I can say, let me expand this, this is bigger, okay? Now with that said, I can define the first thing. It's the address. Let me grab the account address, account. I'm just gonna define this address, okay? This will be equals to what? Signer, we already know, address of. And the reason why I'm doing it this way, so then the function is not too crowded with the argument, because I have to pass this entire thing. I'm going to say address of, and I'm going to pass the reference to account. So I'm going to say reference account. Beautiful. Okay, so we have now account address. Next, we want to confirm that we have the table. So we have defined an empty table. That means that the seller has been registered. So I'm going to say assert. And what do I need to do? I just have to type exist. That's another operator. And what exists? Prop list. And what's the key for that prop list? Account ADDR, which we just obtained from here. Okay, so we pass that. That should check if we have data stored in the smart contract. And if this is true, that means that the account has been registered. Else, just throw an error code. I can say 0. I can say 101. Let's define the property. We're going to say prop list. And now we are going to borrow. We have to borrow mutable. So I'm going to say borrow global mute. I am borrowing prop list, and I'm passing the account. And what I want to do is I want to update this state, the state of this storage, right? So we want to update the state. So we are first storing a mutable state of this storage into prop list, and I can now say, let's define a new ID. So we are going to pass a new property ID, right? But the first thing I'm going to do, I'm going to obtain the existing property ID, and we are going to increment that property ID by 1. So it's the new ID. It's the next ID available. So I'm going to say new ID is equal to prop underscore list. I now can obtain the value for prop ID. Boom. And we're going to add 1, okay? Because this is mutable. Okay, we can mutate this state. This will change to new ID. Now, the next thing that I'm going to do, it's one of the functions in the table, which is upsert. Okay, so we're going to say table upsert. Okay, this is the function that is going to allow me to add to the table. We're going to say mute as immutable, prop underscore list. We are obtaining the property because we have borrowed that mute state of the property list, and we have to call now what? The table. What's the table.info? That's the table. Once I obtain the table, I read and I grabbed that table from storage, and it's mutable. I can make changes to it, right? The first thing that I'm going to pass, very similar to the map, is going to be the key. So I am going to pass what as the key. It's going to be the new ID that I obtained here. I grab this, and I'm going to pass that as a key. And what do I need to pass next? Is the data that the seller is sending me over the application, over the front end. There must be a filled in blanks and all the information that the seller is going to provide to us, sends the request RPC, calls the smart contract, and then passes the data down here. We're going to say prop info. And that's how we insert a new property into the smart contract. And we have to make sure that we update prop ID. And we know that prop list is mutable. That means that I can update this as I go. So I'm going to say now prop list dot what? Prop ID is equal to what? To new ID. There you go. And that's how we generate a new listing. That is very cool. And finally, we are going to now read from the table, okay? So now we're going to do another function, read property. And the only 2 arguments that I'm going to pass is going to be signer, obviously, and the ID of the property that you want to read, that you want to obtain the values for. Read property is going to say account, and this will be signer, not reference to signer, because we are just doing borrow. Once I do that, I am going to now pass prop underscore ID, and this will be type U64. That's the type, so then we can obtain the information. And I am going to show you something. I have to return what I need to obtain, but let me finish the function and we'll get back to that because it's a lot. We're going to say acquire prop list, okay? You are experts at this point. Now, the first thing I'm going to do is define the account address. As a matter of fact, this will be here. And as a matter of fact, when we wrote that list property, this signer is already passing reference, so I am not need to add the reference here. So that should be fine. I realized this once I did this. Okay, so this is good. Awesome. So now I am going to do the same assert just to do some safety mechanisms here. I am going to say let prop list. And now instead of me borrowing mutable state, I'm just going to borrow global without mutable. I'm gonna grab this, let's say this, bam, and just remove this, okay? This is not mutable, this is just to read. And now let's say info. So now we are going to obtain info from prop list. How do I borrow from the table itself? Now we have to obtain the values from the table. We have to read from the table. In order for me to insert a new entry on the table, I have to upsert, and then I pass the arguments. Now to borrow, it's just borrow, okay? So we're going to say table, and I can say borrow, okay? And we first of all pass a reference to prop list, which is your variable that borrows the state of the storage. We're going to say .info, and we're saying comma, and I'm going to pass the ID of the property that I want to get the information from, okay? I'm going to say prop underscore. This is what the user is going to give to us. And that it's it. Now I have to return all the values. I am going to say this. Remember here that I said, let me do this at the end. Okay, now I'm going to do it. So all I'm going to do is before acquires, I can also define the return here. I'm going to say expand here. And let's say all the types that I should be returning once I do this info, once I obtain the borrow from the table and then grab the info, what types of values should I be expecting on the table? So the property is going to be U16, U16, U16 string. So we have 3 U16s, string, U16, and Boolean. I want to say U16, comma, U16, comma, I'm going to say U16, comma, string, U64, and Boolean, okay? So u64 and boolean. There you go. I'm telling move, hey, I'm going to be returning those types. And now I can do the actual return. I can do this right here. Info what? Beds, comma, info bats. You already get it, okay? Info dot s square meter, comma, info dot what? Physical address, comma, info what? Price, and finally, info dot available. And we should obtain everything with this return. Once I read, I should be obtaining everything as a tuple, and I can just grab whatever I need from that return. I don't need to define all of the returns as variables. I can just obtain what I need, and I can unassign a value. I don't need to declare all of them. Let me show you. Let me show you. So I'm going to say, let's test. I'm going to say test, and let's say only because we're going to be printing. So let's define here, use std, debug, print. And I am also going to define UTF-8, okay? We're going to be using test only, and we're going to be writing some strings. I'm going to say use std, string, UTF-8, attribute, test. And now we're going to say function, test, function, and I have to define also the account. Forgot about that. So I'm going to say test, and let's define one user account. Let's call this seller1 equals at account 0x123. Seller2 equals, we have two sellers, account 0x124. And now let's build a function, and let's pass the signer arguments. So I'm going to say seller1 is type signer, seller2 is type signer, and there you go. Okay. But because we are going to be invoking read, we are definitely going to acquire. And if we are writing, we are also acquiring. So we have to acquire here as well. So I'm going to say acquires prop list as well. Okay. Very important. And now I'm going to initialize. The first thing, register the seller. So let's do register, and let's just pass the seller. We're going to say here seller1, and this should register that first seller. Okay. Next. Now, after I register that account, right? After we register the account that just initializes storage with empty table, then we can start listing and reading properties and such. We're going to say, let's pass the property itself. Okay, so let's pass a list, a property that a seller wants to list. So I'm going to say let's, and we can say property info, and we are going to define the type, right? Property. And this is the information that I have to provide for the property. I can actually do this. I can go the lazy mode. I can just copy this whole thing and paste it right below here, right? And all I have to do is replace it with the actual values. I'm going to say property info, bats, 2 bats, 3 bathrooms, square meters, property has 110 square meters. The physical address, let's define this to be UTF-8. And we are going to say the city is Santa Marta. If you have never seen Santa Marta, let me do byte first. Santa Marta is in Colombia. It's beautiful. It's a beautiful country. It's a beautiful city, beachfront. It's very, very beautiful. So I'm going to say Santa Marta, and we'll say Colombia. And the price, how much are we going to charge for this property? We're going to charge 120,000 USD. Okay, so this is 120,000 USD, and it's available. That will be true. That's the information that we're going to be passing to the module. Now we have to pass the property. Okay, so we are going to invoke that function to list the property. So we're going to say list property, and what arguments am I going to pass? The seller and the property info. Okay, those are the only 2 arguments that I have to provide. So we're going to say signer. Okay, this will be seller1, and we pass property info, and there we go. So we effectively list the first property for sale. Let's test and make sure that we don't run into any errors, and then we can do a function to read from the table. Let's do APTOS move test, see how it goes, and we got, okay, I didn't close an expression, so let me go here, move to, and sure enough, I didn't close this. Boom, I sure did not. So let me, same here. Okay, I forgot to close this. So let's say here, well, let's test it out. Okay, we have not used a print, nor we have used seller2, and that's expected, but everything passed. Okay, that's good. Now, with that said, I am going to read the property. Okay, so let's read the property. So I'm going to say let, and now here's the fun part, because when we invoke read property, we are going to be returning all this. So I should be obtaining all those values as a return. If I want to obtain just a particular value, let's say physical address, I can define just that particular variable, and the other ones, I can leave them undefined. So let's say I want to get the physical address. That means that I have to declare not the first 1, 2, 3, the fourth value. I have to declare it as a variable, and then the rest are going to be undeclared. So this will be a tuple here. So I'm going to say this, the first value. If we want to unassign a variable or we want to undeclare a variable, I can do underscore. This will be an undeclared variable. The second value, undeclared. The third value, undeclared. And now the fourth value is where I need to define that variable name. So I'm going to say location. This is like the physical address, okay? And now we are going to finish the other ones with undeclared, which is 5 and 6, I believe. It's going to be the price, it's going to be the info if it's available. So those ones, I don't need the information. If you need them, then you have to declare which one do you need, okay? So this grabs only location, everything else is unused. We're going to say equals to now read property. And the arguments that I will be passing, seller 1, this will be my signer, and I have to pass the ID, the key of the property that I want to get the information from. So this will be the first property. We have stored just one property. Once we execute this, this is just one property. Now let's print. Let's see if we get the address, okay? We are going to say print, and we are going to say reference to location. This is the only variable that I define. We're going to save this, and if everything goes well, we should see the address displayed on the console, okay? Let's give it a shot. I'm just gonna finish here, go back, clear, test it out, and see what we get. Boom! We definitely got the information we wanted to. We have the address. Awesome. Okay, let's do another function. Let's store another property with a different seller. Okay, seller number 2. Let's use that. I'm gonna grab this entire thing, just copy it, boom, paste it right below here. And now we are going to register seller number 2. We are going to be registering a property with 2 bathrooms, 150 square meter. And this will be in Dubai. So let's say Dubai, and UAE will be the country. And the price is going to be 150. Okay. Let's say, no, actually, it's going to be a little bit higher than that. It's going to be 350,000 USD. And it's available. And I have to now list the property under seller number 2. And I want to obtain from seller number 2 the first property that has been declared, which is this one. And instead of location, let's just grab the price. Okay, so we are going to undeclare location, and I have to now declare price, which will be here. Let's say price, and I'm just going to pass price and save and crossing fingers. And there we go. We are done. Property number 1, we obtain the address. Property number 2, we obtain the price of the property. Awesome. Alrighty, this is the end of video number 6. On video number 7, we are beginning to work with vectors in Move. See you on video number 7.